Morning, Cathy.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to see you. Did you have a nice time floating around on your boat?
Oh, God, it was an eating competition.
I bet it was.
Oh, God. I mean, it's great speaking, nice setup, captive audience, loads of people really interested in what I'm doing, all right, and all great. Drag me off for drinks, I can cope with all that. But 24-hour non-stop food, my God.
So you mean it could be a good way to put on weight just before you leave for an expedition?
Cathy, I guarantee it.
Right.
I absolutely guarantee it. They reckon you can do a stone a week easily.
Oh, my goodness. Just what you need before an expo.
They call it carbo loading. I'll just get some weight on, it'll be right. I'm in Torridon next week with ice axes. I don't care.
It's more efficient to carry weight on your body than it is to carry food in the sled. There's quite a lot to be said for putting on an extra couple of kilos. You're guaranteed to lose it. Unless, of course, they cancel the expedition, in which case you're stuck with all the extra kilos. That's a bit depressing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Shall we start getting on?
Oh, if you insist.
Yes. Okay. So recording started and ready when you are to start.
Welcome, everyone, to our next episode of Think Like an Explorer. And today we're taking a break from the expedition planning, and we're going to talk about a theme that is more general to adventure and to the world of business. And today's theme is about extreme sport and why it's a brilliant way to relax, which sounds so totally counterintuitive. Of all the things you'd want to do at the end of a busy business week, you're much more likely to want to put your feet up on the sofa with a glass of wine than to go and get your ass in gear and traipse out to do something that's supposed to be dangerous and difficult and risky. And I did a bit of looking around on the internet, and there's a wonderfully scathing article in the Financial Times by Lucy Kellaway about how CEOs who do extreme sport are just showing off, basically. The CEO gets by on 4 hours of sleep a night, and they are busy, running 20 kilometers at 4:30 a.m. while the rest of us are still fast asleep. Frankly, I'm in the fast asleep queue for 4:30 in the morning. So that's not quite what we're speaking about. What I wanted to explore today, though, is why what gets roughly labeled as extreme sport is actually a really interesting thing to do and has some advantages that people, I think, misunderstand, because all they see is risk and adrenaline and drama rather than understanding what it's really about. So, Nigel, I mean, what's your activity of choice if you want to relax from a long, stressful work week?
Depending on the weather, Cathy, particularly mountaineering. If I can get out and perhaps not do a big technical climb, but get into the hills, go and do a mountaineering route, or just locally, the hills around here, just get out for a day, get some fresh air in my lungs, get some time to get all the rubbish out of my system, and relax. Just take some time out for me and then just wander back. And usually you've had some fantastic ideas while you've been out there.
I mean, why does that work for you rather than saying you're tired? Why go and do something that's going to make you even more tired?
Well, I don't think it does. I think it does quite the opposite, Cathy. I think it actually wakes you up and invigorates you. And looking on some of the sites and information that you sent over to me, I mean, there's a really, really important thing, I think, about people taking a walk, say a walk in the countryside against a walk in the city. Because if you get it's noted down there, if you get into the outdoors and you realise where you are in the world, you can get some fresh air, you can sort of open your eyes, you can see some nature. It seems to have an enormous effect on the brain compared to, we're going to walk down to the sandwich shop at the end of the street in some concrete. And to get out, I'm a big lover of nature, certainly since I had my accident. To get out and to see the spring flowers, it just resets my brain, it just slows things down, it makes me think, makes me relax, empties all the week's rubbish away. And very often, even in the summer, you know, straight out from work, I'll just go for a couple of hours and just wander and just get all of the, you know, you might sort of say defrag your brain, get all the rubbish out, because then you can do something positive and you feel physically and mentally invigorated at the end of it.
Yeah, the science that's coming out is quite interesting. Again, it's you know, as usual, it's a set of reasonably small studies for which people are then extrapolating to make some big claims.
Yeah.
But I mean, we live in a world where everyone now buys into the fact that sitting is the new smoking and we're all going to die young because we spend our lives in office chairs and this kind of thing. And oh my God, get up and exercise. And everyone's counting on the Fitbits, and you hear the stories about executives out there at 11 o'clock at night walking up and down the pavement because they're desperate to hit the 10,000 steps. But the science is saying that there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
That kind of exercise, the on the treadmill in the gym, or just pounding up and down the pavement in pursuit of the mythical 10,000 number, it's very restricted.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we like it is because it's a routine and we can do it without thinking, and that helps us get it done, which is better than not doing it at all. But the downside of something like that's a routine is your mind doesn't have to be there. You can be on the treadmill thinking about something else altogether. And I think one of the key problems for a lot of us who are just stressed by our lives and our work is the inability to shut your mind off. Even when you're on the sofa, your mind is still churning over what you're worried about, which of course is where the glass of wine comes in.
Oh, yes.
As we start self-medicating in various ways to try and shut out the noise, the mental noise, even when we think of ourselves as physically resting. And for me, this is the key point.
Yeah.
You need that exercise. We know that it's good for us. We know that it helps us to be more healthy, to think more clearly, to clear away the cobwebs. But for me, the whole point about what gets called extreme sport is any activity that requires complete focus. So if I'm out rock climbing,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to die. I'm talking about sport climbing. We've got all the safety gear in place, but I'm going to scare myself fairly badly if I fall off the rock face, you know, there are consequences. But when I'm in it, when I'm trying to work my way up this vertical cliff face with falling off as the consequence for making a mistake,
Yeah.
I tell you, there is no space in my head to be running a shopping list about next week's chores and all the things that I haven't got done and all the people I need to contact and, you know, whether the business strategy is the right one at all or whether we're going up a blind alley. I think that's the unspoken secret of the extreme sports.
Yeah.
They require such clean focus that you cannot be thinking about 101 other things.
The thing is, Cathy, and I only wrote a blog about this just before the end of last year. People were asking me, you know, how you cope with stress. Standing on 4 little crampons while you're halfway up an ice route, hanging off an ice axe, trust me, you will concentrate on what you're doing. And everything in the world that is irrelevant is gone. And we are not machines. As you say, let me get the 10,000 steps in because then I've achieved my target. Well, listen to the CEO at home, at work. I will achieve my target. Oh, please, just go and enjoy yourself. Forget the 10,000 steps. Forget, oh, I've got to be on as you know, I was on a cruise ship last week. Me on a cruise ship, I ask you. Speaking on a cruise ship. And I went to one of the gyms because they did foot surveys. And I thought, I've got to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Took my shoes and socks off, sat down, frightened the life out of people. No toes for people that don't know. And behind me were people on bikes with TV screens in front of them with the road on so they can cycle and do this on the trials bike, which is great. But I've got a bike and there's a big world out there. I used gyms when I first had my injuries and it was because I couldn't go anywhere else. Oh, but come on. There is the most beautiful thing outside, and we are not machines. We are organic beings, and we need mental relaxation and mental stimulus, and we don't need it by just ticking figures. We need it by just being people.
But I think there's a counter side to that. You suggest that you leave your targets behind, stop being wedded to the magic 10,000 figure, which I think apparently is just a complete thumbsuck figure. There's no science that says 10,000 is our magical result. These kind of activities, these high focus, intense activities, are problem-solving activities in their own right. Yeah. But they're problem-solving activities using your body. So get your bum out of the office chair or off the sofa.
Yeah.
But stick with the things that probably, are pushing you in business. Most of us enjoy problem-solving, or up to some extent. That's why we're in business, leading business or self-employed in business. And I think a lot of these activities appeal to that same sort of people, whether you're trail running. So instead of pounding a pavement where you don't have to think about where your foot goes next because it just goes onto the next piece of tarmac. If you're on a trail, there's roots and rocks and mud and trees, and you have to think about what you're doing next. And obviously, when we get to the more intense stuff, if we're talking about rock climbing, if we're talking about backcountry skiing, you are intensely involved in problem solving on both a physical and mental level. You're also intensely involved in risk management.
Yes.
And again, the truth is that to put your hands up, to run a business, to start a business, to be self-employed in business, you have to have a certain appetite for risk.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be thinking, I can deal with this stuff. I can make a plan. I actually find making a plan quite interesting.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of extreme sport, it isn't about how close to the edge can I go, dicing with death. That's just the stuff they put in headlines of media. It's much more about unknown environment, set of risks that I can predict up to a certain extent. How am I going to chart a safe way through this? It's problem solving. And I think that's, the Lucy Kellaway Financial Times article suggests that it's about big egos. CEOs have massive egos, and CEOs fancy themselves doing, hardcore sport, and it's just big egos. I think she's missing the point.
Yeah.
I think it's about the same kind of attraction to problem solving.
Yeah, yeah. And on a financial side, Cathy, it could also be the fact that the CEOs have probably got the money to pay for it as well. Well, that's another subject we talked about before. But you're right. And we are in business as in exploration or adventure or whatever people want to tag an extreme sport as. Now, there's another subject. But we are problem solvers. We are people that want to achieve. But also we understand the fact that we may set a target, we may want to do something, but we know very well that it will change every moment. Because when we're climbing, say people like mountain biking or whatever it is, you are actively thinking thousands of times a second on what you're doing. The moment you lose concentration is the moment you lose it. And you'll be off the bike, off the rock, fall over, whatever. But it's a different kind of concentration, I think, Cathy, because I can go bike riding or mountaineering, and it's just an organic thing sometimes. You just think automatically what's going to happen. You don't have to make a conscious choice a lot of the time, unless you are teetering on something really quite horrible and you think, ooh, this is really quite nasty, because it gives you time. When you don't have time and you're moving on the rock and you're just going, it shuts everything away. But it's constant decisions. But something I do find is it also lets you make decisions. Because I often find if I've got a problem and my head's not in the right place, go and climb something. And by the time you're finished with it, you probably knew what the answer was to start with, but now you feel happier taking it.
Yes, I think it feeds into this issue about certain decisions happen in the subconscious. But if you are stuck with this worry list of 127 different things all at the same time that you carry with you day and night, and I think certainly some people get trapped up in this, and social media and all the bing, bing, bings of all the notifications on our phones and our emails and everything do not help, because they just remind you of all the different things you aren't dealing with and all the different people you ought to be talking to and how complicated your life is. That confusion, I think, doesn't allow for this subconscious working through problems. Whereas again, these kind of sports, because they require this complete focus, and if you're doing them well, you get this thing they talk about being in the zone, where you're not even thinking of it as consciously making all these complex decisions. It's just flowing. It's just happening perfectly. And I think that the benefit of that is, under all of that, your subconscious mind is being left alone to think cleanly and clearly about some of these other issues in your life.
I mean, something I know before we came on here, Cindy, you're going skiing in a couple of weeks. I'm going skiing in a couple of weeks. And Cathy, you're never off skis, so that doesn't count.
I'm going skiing this afternoon.
Yes, exactly. But, you know, we're all skiers in a degree, in whatever way. And we all know that some days you just put your skis on and it just happens. Everything seems to go right. Everything's a dream. We ski really well. And we're just laughing and giggling inside of our minds, and everything is sort of settling down to where it ought to be. The next day, though, you can put them on and everything's wrong and it's a nightmare. And it gives us that subconscious edge sometimes when things are going well. And Cathy, you'll know this, some days you go climbing and it's just horrific. You think, what is going wrong with me? The next day, it's just a dream. And it sometimes is your ability for your subconscious to let go, and your ability to just relax and say, I am in the zone, wherever that zone is. I am here today. Let's enjoy it. Don't think about it too much, because you'll get out. Just and an old phrase we say, let the skis run. Stop fighting them. Let them run.
I think it's a good confidence builder as well. If your entire life is invested in your work, or perhaps your work and your family, it's actually quite nice to have something else that you do and you do well. Chance said, we've talked about the idea of tackling problems and risk in a different environment. And I think that teaches you things you can bring back. But the sheer confidence of just tackling problems that are solved easily and quickly, in a sense. Your business problems are kind of never solved, because as soon as you've done something well, it's opened up a whole new set of opportunities that have brought in a whole new set of problems. You can feel as if you never reach the top of anything. Whereas these extreme sports are much cleaner and clearer. To climb a cliff face and actually get to the top of it and go, yes, did that one, add that one to the logbook. To ski a long slope off-piste and come screaming down to the bottom and turn around and look back at your first tracksuit of powder and go, yes, I own that slope. That is a wonderful feeling of clean, clear success.
Yes.
And clean, clear confidence in your ability to be good at stuff.
Yes.
And I think that helps you come back to the much more complicated world of business.
Yeah. Something else I noticed in one or two of the websites you were sending over was the feeling of insignificance.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reality is, and we've certainly both been there at some point in our lives, we are a very small dot at times in a very, very big landscape. And I think you need to understand that. Nobody is so important. Nobody is so big. You have to understand what the size we are in the world, but also it gives you, it's the most incredible feeling to me personally, to be out somewhere where, there is nothing in front of me for miles. And I mean miles. Going out on an ice cap, you are the tiniest dots in the world. It's a wonderful, wonderful sensation to also know you're not surrounded by 250,000 other people. And that gives me some of the best reflective time I think I can ever personally experience. And I can come back absolutely on fire. And from a trip like that, people will say, you're just so busy, you're so active. It doesn't feel like it, but my brain has reset so well. You just come home and you just deal with things.
Yeah, it's interesting. I get two things out of that sense of insignificance, which I find really helpful. The one is the big picture. We live in worlds that we've covered in concrete and tarmac and buildings, and we've wired them up with all our telecommunications, and we feel we're in charge of the world, and then we realize we're responsible for global warming, and we're in charge and we're doing badly. So all of that is, we get a weird over-involved in our own sense of importance. You get out into the wilderness and you get that big picture and realize that it's much bigger and wilder and more complicated, and it was there before us and it'll be there after us.
Yeah. And
I feel that helps when you're stuck with the feeling that you're responsible for everything. And if you don't make the right decisions, it's going to be the end of the world. And the truth is, it isn't. The world will go on without you. We may be missed briefly. It will have some consequences, but it's not world ending. And so that helps, I think, to bring problems back down into perspective. But it's not just about feeling small. I get two things out of it. I get the feeling small thing and a very small part of a much, much bigger picture. And a picture that endures over centuries and millennia. But then you go out, you as that very small person, and you take one step and another step and another one and another one. And after hours, you look back and you realize that all those little 20 centimeter steps, they've moved you a remarkably long way.
Yes.
In that wilderness.
Yes.
The power of just taking one step after another, keep on trucking, work out what direction you're going in. So, it's a complete waste of time. Yeah. Keep on trucking.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a consistency of purpose. As you say, some people will think, well, we only made 2 miles today, 3 kilometers today. Yes, but we made that 3 kilometers. Never be fearful of going slow. Just be very fearful of standing still. And some days you have to stand still. If the weather is horrific, you don't have a choice. But every other day, keep chipping away, bit by bit. That huge journey, that monstrous undertaking, that, I don't know, rebuilding a new house, brick by brick, bit by bit, you'll get there.
Yes, it's an interesting, very physical lesson in a world where we're quite enamored with instant results, with getting famous super fast, with launching your startup incredibly quickly, with becoming a billionaire with your IPO within 2 years. None of that stuff is going to happen for the majority of us. And even when you see it happen, even when you see the that moment of glory as people step onto the summit or people walk away with the astonishing rewards of the IPO, you haven't seen the days and weeks and years of one step after another, 20 centimeters at a time, hour after hour and day after day. And I think these activities in the wilderness are a very strong physical and mental reminder. That's what it actually takes to make progress. Yeah.
I mean, you don't see marathon runners who just stand up off a sofa one morning and run 26 miles. There might be the odd one. Most people have, as you say, they've put the time in. They've put I ran a mile and I felt exhausted. And then I did 2 miles and I felt exhausted. And chip by chip, step by step, bit by bit, you cross that line at the end of the marathon. You might not be, sub 3 hours or whatever, but you did it. And they can't take that away from you. It's just,
And honestly, the ones who apparently got off the sofa, they probably did another sport or another activity, and then they stepped across.
Yes. Yes. You just don't have the physical endurance. And that's something else I find as well. By going on, I can't run anymore because of my injuries, but I can walk and I can go mountaineering, I can go biking. Besides the fact that mentally, obviously, clears the mind. Physically, it's fantastic for the body. In more ways than one. So if you do go into an extreme situation as a CEO, and as I've done before, 24-hour standby, the weather's in, the snow's down, everything's falling to pieces, you just deal with it. You can just walk in. I walk into situations where everybody is in absolute chaos, and I love it because it's just my cup of tea. Don't give me boring things. Give me, the roof coming down, everything falling in, because you just suddenly learn by doing those exercises and by going out into the environment. Firstly, what's really important. Secondly, what really matters at the time. And then you can think, right, we can just put them into the order. We can deal with them. It's not the issue. It's absolutely fine. Pump, 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 chip by chip, step by step, job done. Easy. And it gives you that skill to do that, or enhances it. I think every so often we need to go out and reset ourselves, whether it be in sport or whatever, so that when these things happen, we don't have to be, oh, we trained last week for it, because we just deal with it as if it's a normal working day.
Yeah. I think there's something else as well that I find useful on a purely practical level. Again, we've got the problem of how do you fit all of this into your day? And that's why the Fitbit's reminding us to get up and take the stairs and, quickly go out and walk around the block at lunchtime or whatever. Those help. But it limits the other advantages of exercise. Most of these extreme sports happen with companions. Yeah. At least with one other person for safety reasons, and often in a group. And there's a commitment to other people that says, yeah, I'm going to have to close down the laptop and walk away from this because I told someone that I would meet them in the car park at 1:30 this afternoon, even though the snow is not that great. And we're going to skin our way up the edge of our local ski resort just for that exercise.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's too easy to let work invade every minute, to assume that exercise is something that you can get around to doing tomorrow, because it's the one place you might be able to claw back a little bit of time in your day.
There's some laughing going on here, Cindy. I can see you. Yeah.
No, you're quite right. Everything you said from a business point of view, I love how when I do skiing, you're so right about it, focusing the mind. I am petrified of it. I grew up skiing should be a sport to avoid at all costs. So I decided, let's try and master this horrid thing. But I do find every time I go out and ski, back in the lodge, suddenly all my business problems suddenly become very clear. I know exactly, because I've got rid of all the little mundane things and I can see what really needs to be done. And I will take my notes and I will sit and make a list of what needs to be done in priority. So just getting out there, refocusing the mind on something else, it's almost like whilst the mind is concentrating on that problem, something will click and suddenly the answer will come through as to what else I need to do for the business. So it's always been good from that viewpoint.
And this is the reason I think we should completely get rid of officers and just go skiing or surfing or climbing, because we would walk down, do 8 hours work in 10 minutes at the end of it and said, what were you lot sitting about for? There it is, right, finished, I'm off again. We do thankfully have that ability, and I think it's a very precious thing that we need to use, and we need to exercise, because there are lots of people that literally will go to work, come home, sit down, do nothing, go to work the next day. Now, if that's their choice, that's fine. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. It's not mine. But I find that time just appears when I want it to. We can all sit in front of these things day and night. We can have 8 monitors at work in the day, come home, sit in front of a TV, get on the laptop or on the tablet or whatever, never remove Bluetooth from the back of our head and go to bed. Or we can say, I've done my data time today or whatever. And because, as you say, Cathy, it's in a group, we will every Thursday evening we go and play badminton or whatever it happens to be. And the group gives you, firstly, the gregarious side of the human being, because we are designed to live in groups and with people, not on our own, stuck in a box. And also the fact that by working with the group, we can share things with each other. And we can see how other people deal with things and how their lives are. And we can share thoughts, experiences, because there's nothing worse than going through a wonderful experience and having nobody to share it with. And we can then look into, what did I learn? What have I done? Why is that decision that I saw somebody else do actually reflected on me? And I find that really quite powerful. And we can help each other and teach each other. And that in itself feeds back into the CEO side, because we start learning through teaching, which is something I've been doing quite a long time. It's all right telling people everything, but you've got to learn by teaching them and doing it yourself.
I think also, coming back to your point about with meeting people somewhere to do exercise, I find doing exercise or an extreme something with somebody else actually just pushes you that little bit to do something. Whereas if I was left by myself, then I'd probably get all foggy focused and find other ways to procrastinate than actually get out there and do it, which is something that you do with business as well, that you kind of put off, you get inventive on finding ways on how not to do something, and all sorts of reasons. So by actually buddying up with somebody on an extreme thing that you then both have to focus, it also brings into play with what you've just said.
Yeah. I mean, no problem is too big to talk yourself out of it, is it really? And people do it. People will. Oh, I can't be bothered. Oh, it's raining tonight. I mean, how many runners do you see? It's pouring it down with rain and they're still out. I was at work 6 a.m. Christmas morning, and there was a team of cyclists came through the town. It was, I don't care if it's Christmas, we're going biking. The fact they've been up at 5 and opened all the new presents and got new kit and bikes, but it was just, come on, this is a group thing. Let's go, let's enjoy it. And then we can stuff ourselves with everything else.
I think there's a slight downside, which I have seen. I've run into the occasional CEO who tells me how they work 18-hour days and they're still training for a triathlon, which is like, 2 hours a day. And it's such a shame I only get to see the kids for 20 minutes. And you go like, well, that's an interesting choice you've made. There's some truth in that some very, very driven people are good CEOs and good at extreme sport and possibly fairly bad at actually having families.
Yes.
But there's another side to this. You don't have to be doing it all at this uber extreme level. And all of these things, if they're good for you, they're good for the kids.
Absolutely.
Not least because a lot of extreme sport happens off the mobile phone network.
Yeah.
You cannot be constantly checking your social media and being connected to your screens. It's a good activity, hiking, rock climbing, skiing, all of these things. They are great activities for families.
Yeah.
They're great for kids, for learning about risk and responsibility and consequence, for getting exercise and for getting them away from their telephones.
And getting you away from yours as well. You can't belay your 6-year-old while you're trying to text on the phone, Your concentration's really would be, that's my child. But I completely agree, Cathy. I was only speaking last week on the cruise about, I have some friends who have 3 little ones who are absolute terrors. I love them to pieces. But it really will be, can we go bike riding? Of course we can. Let's go now. And they're getting to the age the stabilizers are coming off and all they want to do is just, I'll put this in Derbyshire, taz off at great speed. They just want to go everywhere, explore everything. And that in itself is an extreme sport. Firstly, trying to keep the 3 of them together. But also just the fact that can't we learn so much by the view they have in their eyes at that age? Because they accept everything and they see everything and listen to everything and ask the right questions because they just want to know. And they are just wonderful to work with. Exhausting, but wonderful.
I think that sounds like a good place to wrap up, not least because my builders who were supposed to turn up 2 hours ago have just arrived. So, yes, extreme sport, it's great. And so Nigel and I are badly biased when it comes to this. But you don't have to be climbing Everest and, you don't have to be trying to trek to the North Pole or something. There's real value to be found in this for us as individuals, for the way we connect with our families, and for what it feeds back into the work that we are doing in the rest of our time. So forget about the extreme. Just think about anything, physical activity that gets you out of the city and into the wilderness.
Definitely.
That's what really makes a difference.
And a big difference at that.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. And this time we're going to be looking at constant communication and technology on expeditions and why it's not nearly as much fun as you might think. We'll see you next time.
See you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.